The night he told me I couldn't work, I was standing by the kitchen sink, still in my apron, wiping my hands on a towel. Daniel leaned against the counter with a glass of whiskey, speaking as if he were announcing the weather. "I just think," he said casually, "a wife should focus on the home. Leave the earning to the man." He didn't say it like a request. He said it like a rule. I smiled the way I'd learned to, a quiet, non-committal curve of my lips, and nodded. Of course. Inside, something small cracked. When we married, I thought we were partners. I thought our future meant ours. But somewhere along the way, ours had become his. He worked in finance, made good money, and soon convinced himself it meant his dreams were the only ones worth chasing. I had dreams too, tucked away in an old notebook in my closet. Sketches for eco-friendly home products I once thought could change the industry. But every time I mentioned them, Daniel would wave a hand. "Cute ideas," he'd say. "But hobbies don't pay the bills." That night, after clearing his glass and loading the dishwasher, I walked into the garage. It smelled faintly of motor oil and dust. The space was cluttered with old boxes, a half-broken treadmill, and tools Daniel hadn't touched in years. I stood there for a long time, staring at the emptiness in the middle of the floor. If I was going to be just a wife, I thought, maybe I could also be something else. Something he didn't see coming. That was the first time the thought whispered to me. You don't have to ask permission to build something that's yours. It wasn't rebellion, not at first. It was survival. For weeks after, I played the role Daniel loved. Breakfast on the table by 7. Floors clean enough to eat from. Dinner ready before he walked in the door. He never suspected that while he sat in the living room watching TV, I was in the garage on my old laptop, researching suppliers, reading manufacturing guides, and teaching myself e-commerce. I worked in silence, in the hours when he was asleep or gone. The garage became my hidden office, my lab, my refuge. Every click of my keyboard felt like a secret heartbeat. Daniel thought I was knitting or scrolling social media. He never asked. Why would he? In his mind, I had no ambition beyond keeping his shirts ironed and his meals hot. One night, as I was sketching a new design for a biodegradable storage container, I heard his footsteps in the hallway. My heart jumped. I shut the laptop, shoved it under a pile of old blankets, and pretended to be folding laundry. He poked his head in. "What are you doing out here?" I smiled. "Just tidying up." He grunted, turned back toward the bedroom. Only when I heard the door close did I take the laptop out again. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the thrill of getting away with it. I didn't know it then, but that night was the beginning of something that would one day give me everything Daniel swore I couldn't have. And he would never see it coming. The garage was cold in winter, sweltering in summer, and always smelled faintly of oil and dust. But to me, it was sacred ground. By day, it was still just a garage, boxes stacked high, an old lawnmower in the corner, Daniel's fishing gear piled against the wall. But by night, when the rest of the house slept, it transformed. I cleared a small patch of floor and set up a folding table I found at a yard sale. I taped my sketches to the wall like trophies. A single desk lamp cast a warm yellow glow, and the hum of my laptop was the soundtrack of my secret life. I started small, biodegradable storage containers made from plant-based materials. At first, I bought samples from overseas suppliers, tested them, and sent messages to manufacturers pretending to be a professional product developer. My hands shook every time I hit send, afraid they'd somehow know I was just a woman in a garage hiding from her husband's rules. When the first prototype arrived, I ran my hands over its smooth surface and felt something I hadn't felt in years: ownership. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Daniel never noticed the packages arriving. I had them shipped to a P.O. box under my maiden name. Every time I picked one up, it was like smuggling hope back into the house. The more I worked, the more my double life grew. In the mornings, I baked muffins and packed Daniel's lunch. In the afternoons, I answered supplier emails from my phone while pretending to watch daytime TV. At night, I built my online store, teaching myself photography, writing product descriptions, studying SEO until my eyes burned. By the 4th month, I launched my first small batch of products. I listed them on Etsy under a brand name I'd made up, Green Nest. I didn't expect much, but within a week I sold out. Orders trickled in from strangers who loved my designs. Their messages were filled with gratitude, telling me my containers were the exact solution they'd been searching for. I saved every single message in a special folder. Daniel never suspected. If anything, he was more comfortable than ever. "You've been so peaceful lately," he said one evening, sipping his drink. I smiled into my tea. Just enjoying the quiet. He thought the quiet meant surrender. He didn't know it meant strategy. The garage was no longer just a hiding place. It was my kingdom, and every night I ruled it. One evening, I checked my sales dashboard and nearly dropped my laptop. A bulk order had come in from a boutique in San Francisco. It was worth more than what Daniel gave me for household expenses in 3 months. I sat there, staring at the numbers, my heart pounding. This wasn't just a side project anymore. This was the start of an empire. And if I played my cards right, Daniel would be the last person to find out. The San Francisco order changed everything. Up until then, I'd been selling in small bursts, just enough to keep things quiet. But now? Now I had proof this could be big. Bigger than I'd dared imagine. I stayed up until 3 a.m. that night, researching wholesale pricing, packaging design, and fulfillment options. My garage, once cluttered with old tools, began to transform. The fishing gear got pushed into a corner. The treadmill Daniel swore he'd use one day was dragged to the curb. Stacks of eco-friendly boxes took their place. Every time I looked at them, I felt stronger. I reinvested every penny into the business. Instead of buying myself clothes or jewelry, I bought a label printer. Instead of going to lunch with friends, I negotiated with a supplier in Singapore over video call, wearing pajama pants, with the camera angled so they'd never know. I told Daniel I was rearranging the garage for better storage. He didn't care enough to ask for details. It was perfect. Orders kept climbing. Customers posted photos of my containers on social media, tagging Green Nest with captions like, "Finally, a brand that gets it." I stayed anonymous, hiding behind my brand name. My photo was nowhere on the site, and my personal accounts stayed quiet. But the higher I climbed, the harder it became to hide. One night, Daniel came home earlier than expected. I was in the garage, surrounded by boxes, my laptop open with spreadsheets covering the screen. The whir of the label printer filled the air. His shadow fell across the doorway. "What's all this?" he asked, frowning. My mind raced. I reached for the first excuse I could think of. Just organizing for a friend's moving company. She needed help. He looked at me for a long moment, then shrugged. "As long as it's not costing us money." I forced a laugh. Not a cent. What I didn't say was that the cost was the long nights, the sore wrists, the constant fear of being found out. But every bit of it was worth it. By the 8th month, I was running a full-scale operation from my garage. Bulk shipments came in twice a week. A teenage neighbor I trusted helped me pack boxes in exchange for cash. My revenue passed $80,000. And then the email came. A major sustainable living influencer wanted to feature Green Nest in her top 10 eco-brands list. Her reach was in the millions. I read the email 3 times, my hands shaking. This could be it, the moment that catapulted my brand into the spotlight. But there was a problem. If she featured me, my name, my real name, would have to go public. And if that happened, Daniel would know everything. I stared at the screen, torn between the life I'd built in secret and the risk of stepping fully into the light. I must have read that influencers email 20 times. My heart was a drum in my chest, each beat saying the same thing. This is it. But I could already picture Daniel's reaction if my name appeared on her site. He'd see it as betrayal. In his mind, I wasn't allowed to succeed without him, certainly not in a way that made more than his 6-figure salary. Still, I knew opportunities like this didn't wait around. That night, I sat across from him at dinner, pushing roasted potatoes around my plate. He talked about his day, quarterly reports, office politics, how his junior staff needed more discipline. I nodded at the right moments, but my mind was in the garage, with the email that could change my life. Finally, he looked up. "You're quiet tonight." I smiled faintly. "Just tired." He accepted that without another question. That was Daniel's way. He never dug deeper unless it was about himself. Later, when he fell asleep, I padded barefoot to the garage. The glow of my laptop screen lit up the room. I typed a careful reply to the influencer, agreeing to be featured, but under my brand name only. No personal details. 2 days later, Green Nest appeared on her blog and Instagram. My sales exploded overnight. Orders poured in from across the country. By the end of the week, I had to hire 2 more neighborhood teens to keep up with packing. Daniel noticed something was different. "You've been on the phone a lot lately," he said one evening, eyeing me over his whiskey. "Helping friends with a project," I answered smoothly. If lying was a muscle, Mine had become toned and strong. But the growth came with its own dangers. Deliveries started arriving daily. I had to intercept them before Daniel saw. My bank account swelled to numbers I'd only dreamed of, enough that, for the first time, I imagined what it would be like to leave. Then, one rainy Thursday, the risk I'd been dancing around finally caught up to me. Daniel came home early again. I was in the garage, signing for a shipment, a tall stack of boxes with Green Nest printed across the sides in bold green letters. He stopped in the doorway, rainwater dripping from his coat. His eyes flicked from the boxes to the label printer to me. "What's Green Nest?" he asked slowly. My pulse spiked. "Just something I'm helping with." He stepped closer. "Helping who?" Before I could answer, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen, muttered something about needing to take the call, and walked back into the house. I stood there frozen, the echo of his question still hanging in the air. Because I knew, the next time he asked, I might not be able to lie my way out. After that night, I worked with a constant knot in my stomach. Daniel hadn't pressed further, but I could feel his eyes on me more often, lingering when I answered my phone, watching when I carried laundry baskets that seemed too heavy for just clothes. The garage didn't feel as safe anymore. Still, I couldn't slow down. The influencer feature had set off a chain reaction. My products were now in demand, and I'd just secured my first deal with a national eco-friendly store. If I hesitated, the momentum could die. But every new order, every shipment with Green Nest stamped on the side, felt like an invitation for Discovery Point one afternoon. While Daniel was at work, I had my small crew of neighborhood teens packing boxes. Music played low from my laptop, the air thick with the scent of cardboard and packing tape. Then headlights flashed through the garage windows. Daniel's car. He wasn't supposed to be home for hours. "Go out the back," I whispered to the kids, shoving cash into their hands. They slipped through the side door just as Daniel walked in. His eyes swept over the tables, the boxes, the label printer. He picked up one of the containers, turning it over in his hands. "What is all this?" My mouth went dry. "Just helping a friend with her business. She pays me to pack orders." He frowned. "Since when do you work?" "It's not work, I said quickly. "It's just helping out. Keeps me busy." For a moment, he just stood there, container still in his hand. Then he set it down and muttered, "Don't let it interfere with your real responsibilities." I nodded, smiling just enough to keep him from looking too closely. But inside, my hands were trembling. That night, after he'd gone to bed, I checked my email and froze. It was from the National Store's purchasing manager. They wanted to feature Green Nest in their summer catalog. Not just a small listing, but a full-page spread with my photo and founder's story. My brand. My face. My name. It was the opportunity I'd been dreaming of, the kind of exposure that could double my business overnight. But it also meant there'd be no hiding. I stared at the screen, my cursor hovering over reply. If I said yes, Daniel would find out everything. If I said no, I'd be turning my back on the very future I'd been building. My phone buzzed. A message from the purchasing manager. "Need your answer by tomorrow morning. We're finalizing layouts." I closed my laptop, my heart pounding. Because tomorrow, I'd have to choose between the safety of the shadows and the risk of stepping fully into the light. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw two futures. One where I stayed small and hidden, keeping Daniel content, and one where I stood in the open, no longer needing to measure my worth in his approval. By sunrise, I knew which one I could live with. I emailed the purchasing manager. Yes. Full spread. Send me the details. My hands were steady when I hit send. The photo shoot was arranged in secret. I told Daniel I was visiting an old friend for lunch. In reality, I stood in front of a camera, surrounded by my products, smiling like I hadn't in years. The photographer asked me to hold one of my first prototypes. My fingers curled around it like it was an anchor, the proof of everything I'd built while the world thought I was doing nothing. When the catalog came out 2 months later, I had it shipped to my P.O. box. The cover was glossy, the smell of fresh ink rising as I flipped through. And there I was. Page 14. Myra Lane, founder and CEO of Green Nest, building a greener future from her garage. I held that page for a long time, my chest tightening, not from fear, but from the weight of my own proof. I'd made it, but it didn't stay secret for long. 2 days later, Daniel came into the kitchen holding the catalog. His jaw was tight, the page folded open to my photo. "What is this?" His voice was sharp enough to cut glass. I kept my own voice calm. That's my business. Your business? He almost laughed. You mean the one you've been running behind my back? While lying to me. I set down my coffee. The one I've been building while you told me I wasn't allowed to work. He slammed the catalog on the table. Do you have any idea how this makes me look? My wife sneaking around, pretending to be some big-shot entrepreneur. I didn't pretend, I said, my tone firmer now. I am one. For a moment, he just stared at me, his face unreadable. Then he leaned in, voice low. You're going to shut it down. I met his eyes without flinching. No, the silence between us was thick. Outside, a car passed, the sound of its tires on wet pavement filling the space where his next words should have been. Finally, he straightened, muttering something under his breath, and walked out. The catalog remained on the table, my photo staring back at me. For years, I'd stayed quiet to keep the peace. But now? Now the truth was out, and there was no putting it back in the dark. And deep down, I knew. The next move I made would decide everything. After that confrontation, the house felt different. Daniel barely spoke to me, except for clipped comments about my little side project. He stopped eating the dinners I cooked, stopped asking where I was going. His silence was meant to punish me. But it only made me freer. Green Nest was growing faster than ever. The catalog feature had doubled my sales, and the national store wanted to expand my line. Investors were emailing me, journalists requesting interviews. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't just have money, I had independence. And with that independence came clarity. One rainy Sunday afternoon, I stood in the garage, my garage, watching my small crew tape up another stack of orders. The hum of the label printer was almost soothing. I thought about the woman I'd been 2 years earlier, standing in this same spot, afraid to be found out. She was gone. I knew then that it was time. Not because I wanted to prove Daniel wrong, but because I had nothing left to prove at all. That night, I waited until he came home. He set his keys on the counter without looking at me. I'm leaving, I said. He turned, his brow furrowing. Leaving what? You. For the first time in months, real surprise flickered across his face. You can't just, I can. My voice was steady, not sharp, not emotional. I've built a business worth more than anything in this house. I don't need your permission. I don't need your money. And I will not spend another day in a place where I'm told I'm worth less than I am. He opened his mouth to argue, but I kept going. I'm taking my things, my work, my life, the one I built while you were sleeping in the next room, and I'm walking out. Something in his expression shifted then. It wasn't anger anymore. It was fear. I didn't wait for him to speak again. I walked to the door, my bag over my shoulder, the keys to my new office in my hand. The next morning, I was in that office, a bright, airy space downtown with tall windows and shelves lined with Green Nest products. Sunlight poured in as I signed a partnership agreement with a European distributor. 6 months later, I was on the cover of EcoVision magazine. The headline read, "From Garage to Global, How One Woman Built a $1 million Brand in Secret." Somewhere, I knew Daniel had seen it. Maybe he read the article. Maybe he didn't. It didn't matter. Because this was never about revenge. It was about reclaiming the voice I'd given up. And as the camera flashed during my cover shoot, I thought of all the nights in that cold garage, working while the rest of the house slept. I had been quiet then. But now I was unstoppable. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Thank you.